Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Customer Success Unlocked. This is ESG's monthly webinar series. Our series is on a mission to answer the burning question customer success practitioners everywhere ask. Why do people make critical customer engagement decisions without talking to customers? My name is Peter Armley. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at ESG. The Customer Success as a Service company. We enable companies to build, operationalize, and transform their CS organization and their practices, so they can improve their key metrics and accomplish the ultimate goal for reducing churn and increasing retention. Our webinar series is intended to be an opportunity to tackle important customer success topics that we believe need additional exploration, and we're seeking depth in the discourse, and we want substance without ego. So we enlist guests who have experience doing things customer success should be doing, people who have ideas, and most importantly, people who have a generosity of spirit and are eager to share their points of view. So just a little housekeeping. Tell us in the chat where you're from. Let me just open up my chat. And we'll have around 50 minutes of questions and conversations, and that should leave us enough time to field questions from the audience and at the end, but also even during the conversation. If you have a question that you feel you'd like to just fire off, I'll be looking at that. And I might bring your question into the conversation if it feels right. So let's get started. I have two guests for today's show. The first person I'll introduce is Kelly McMahon-Hall. Kelly's the VP of Solutions, Customer Success and Acceleration at Cisco, an interesting title. Prior to Cisco, Kelly worked at Malwarebytes, Vision Critical, BMC Software, where she and I worked together, and CA Technologies. By the way, Kelly, I also worked at CA at some point in my past. Kelly lives in balmy Tampa, Florida. She tells me it's not balmy today.
Not balmy today.
And happens to be a longtime friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you, Peter. So great to see you again.
Likewise. Turning to my other guest, Sara Bochino is the VP of Customer Success Management for the SMB space at US Bank. Prior to US Bank, Sara worked at Integrate, Oracle, and Cloud Sherpas. Sara and I worked together at Oracle, by the way. She's a longtime friend of mine, and I want to welcome her to this show. It's been a long time since we interacted, actually, Sara, but nice to see you.
It is. Thanks for having me, and great to be here.
Great. So the title of today's webinar is Seeking Simplicity in the Mess of Complexity. And the direction I want to take the conversation is towards customer success at scale, sometimes called scaled customer success or digital customer success, and the implications such models present for companies and for customer success professionals. So let me get something out of the way at the outset. I have a very significant bias in this subject. I see scaled customer success, or whatever the name we want to use, as the now and the future of the organizational business function generally known as customer success. Furthermore, I see the conventional CSM assignment model slowly diminishing as the representative model. I see it still existing, but only for a small fraction of a typical company's customer success motion, one that's focused on the most invested customers going forward. Finally, I see this happening pretty rapidly over the next 2 to 5 years. I feel it's inevitable given the combination of three things: the accelerating B2B customer expectations for B2C types of experiences, the rapid evolution of advanced technologies, and in particular those to do with AI and data analysis, and the natural exponential learning and doing that will occur between the two. And finally, the permanence of financial discipline within companies. So we all have heard a lot and felt a lot this past year around the financial screws being turned. That's, in my mind, going to be a permanent thing. So that's where my head is at after having been in the customer success profession for over 15 years at quite a few companies and in a variety of roles, including heading up a digital CS practice. So question number one, and I'll start, I think, with you, Sara. I'd like to start the question by providing this framework. Let's assume that due to macro events outside of its control, the pressure that a company faces today to retain and grow its existing customer base will only become more intense in the future. We will not see the period of low cost or free money that we had the last 10 or 12 years again for another generation, 20 to 30 years. Given that reorientation of a company's energy will move towards driving retention and growth, What do you see are the top 3 barriers a company needs to tackle before scaled customer success can be seen as a serious vehicle for delivering results in the paradigm shift? Meaning, what needs to happen before the practice is given responsibility for larger ARR account segments?
Oh, hard-hitting question right off the bat. But I'll see what I can do here. So I think that leaders need to illustrate duplicative efforts and overlap in resources that are being done today within their current model. For larger organizations like US Bank, I imagine like Cisco, we have so many touch points that are engaging with customers at this point, and it's leading to more unengaged customers long term. So, as an example, we're lacking consistency and control over consistency and experience within our customer journeys. This is evident, you mentioned the one-to-one assignment of CSMs to customers. How often as a CS leader do you get sales reps that request certain CSMs? Because while we train our CSMs similarly, their acumen differs, right? And the experience is then lacking from account to account, right? Marketing communications are different from customer communications. So I think there's this inherent overlap. So one of the things I would recommend is being able to distill that overlap and what that duplication results in from a resource and capacity perspective, looking at consistency over your customer journey. And then, I think I started down this path of talking about these test cases that customers are doing, right? Being able to, oftentimes companies just kind of scale the experience from one segment to another, oftentimes starting with SMB, because the ARR is lower, and while it can offer you a blueprint, oftentimes companies don't actually feel the value of that experience because those customers by nature churn faster. They are very fickle and they don't have the time. They have their own pressures, right? They have their own time to kind of their own pressures to kind of just move on and get the most value out of whatever they're investing in as well. So oftentimes those blueprints just don't prove out in value because the company loses sight of that. So I would get past the test case piece and push towards understanding those overlap touch points and then creating consistency. So I only narrowed it down to 2. Maybe Kelly has a third one.
That's a nice handoff. Kelly, what are your thoughts?
Well, and actually, I'm going to just add on. I'm going to expand because I think you're absolutely correct. And one of the reasons I think with those test cases, and it's starting more, at the SMB, is a lot of times there's not the proper buy-in, right? And so there has to be a fundamental buy-in around curating a holistic scale journey for our customers. And that buy-in is at the exec level, but it's also across the organization, right? To curate that proper digital journey or scale model, whether it's programmatic with some people, some digital, fully digital, there's so many components that are necessary. And if you don't have the buy-in from the different parts of the organization that they're going to participate, whether it's from IT and the proper systems that are needed, or it's from your product organization and the content that is needed to support that journey. For me, the biggest barrier is getting that buy-in across the organization to say, yes, this is a company initiative. We understand the value that it's going to bring. We're going to set the metrics and we're going to make the proper investment, because without the proper investment, it does become more, incubation, experimental. It's not holistic. The value realization isn't there for the customer or the company, and therefore it doesn't get off the ground running. I think the other thing that, I have been fortunate enough in my career to set up many scale motions. The biggest barrier that I have had in every instance is data. Data is just the bane. It's like the necessary evil, the bane of our existence. And for you to have a true scale motion, for you to be able to have a programmatic approach, to be able to leverage technology, to take some of the heavy lift off of the human aspect, that data has to be accurate and available, and it really has to have that 360 view of the customer. And it's no longer just like CRM data, it's telemetry or metadata, it's the usage data. It's right, because the more holistic 360 picture you have of your customer, where they are in their journey, from a, the life cycle perspective, are they adopting, are they not, how are they using the technology, that allows the level of scale that you can actually provide.
Yeah, I think it opens up a ton of possibilities that overcome kind of the natural reaction. I was going to say instinct. It's not an instinct. It's just a natural reaction of a lot of leaders that this isn't going to work. And it's partly because it hasn't really worked, because we can't get the data organized properly. Is there a generational consideration in this question? Meaning, we have young generation Z, moving into the workforce. Will their sensibilities change this more rapidly? Like, will their willingness and acceptance of digital change this paradigm faster than many people anticipate? Because they're not in executive roles at this time, but they will be.
I mean, so I think that's a loaded question, so I'm going to tread lightly. I don't think it's just generational. I think it's where we are in the world. I mean, listen, I am not of a younger generation, but because of how we access everything today, think of Amazon. Like, for me to actually have to pick up the phone and talk to a human being to acquire something I want to acquire, or even to make a doctor's appointment these days, is painful. Like, we are living in a digital age. And so I think generational, as the consumers, the younger generation of consumers who are our customers, they will take to a digital journey much quicker, I think, than an older generation, because that's how they've grown up. Mm-hmm. Right? With social media, the default is to go to a technology approach. So they'll consume content digitally, better, more efficiently, I think, than generations that haven't. But I think it's a lot of the world we live in now, where it's digital first, right? I remember 20 years ago, back at the CADs, it was like shift left. Do you remember that terminology, where it was like getting people to like self-serve? And it was such a hard motion we were going through in the services in the CS world 15 years ago, like get a customer to use a knowledge base and self-serve. Well, I think we're on the total opposite of that spectrum today, where people would prefer to self-serve in a lot of instances, in a lot of industries and verticals, than to actually have to, reach out, get somebody on the phone, kind of engage directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I can tackle that from two perspectives. One, and I agree with what you're saying, from a consumer perspective, I think they're pushing us a lot faster towards this digital motion, because they don't want to talk to us. They don't want to talk to a CSM. They don't want to have a conversation. I think as a leader within your teams, I think the shift is around the change management it takes from a CSM perspective to go, you're still having a relationship, but the relationship is now shifted towards a relationship with the brand. And we're looking at the tweaks in the data, the dashboards in the data, the behavior with the customers to tweak it. I think that's the biggest hurdle when we talk about change management, I think, or generations, right? Because we have this industry and this market of customer success managers who are so relationship driven, and it's hiring them and changing their approach to say, you're still having a relationship, you're still going to have an interaction with customers. It might not be at the same level that you've had before. You're not going to have quarterly business reviews, but you're still looking after a cohort or a section of customers that needs help, needs nurturing, needs engaging. We're just doing it in a different medium, in a different way. So we have to kind of approach that generational question, I think, in different ways. But I think from a consumer perspective, Kelly, you're absolutely right that they're pushing us down this path of give me what I need now and make it easy, right? Don't put any barriers in my way.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's exactly right. And it actually kind of leans into the next question in a good way. So let me just kind of read a quote from a book called Prediction Machines. And this quote is about artificial intelligence. So with AI, data plays three roles. First is the input data, which is fed to the algorithm and used to produce a prediction. Second is training data, which is used to generate the algorithm in the first place. Training data is used to train the AI to become good enough to predict in the wild. Finally, there's feedback data, which is used to improve the algorithm's performance with experience. In some situations, considerable overlap exists, such that the same data plays all three roles. Now, I don't mean to kind of confuse anything, but it really brings to mind for me this question. In your role, and Kelly, I'll have you answer first. In your role as a leader of a practice that depends in large part, and you mentioned this about data, on either building and leveraging the infrastructure that generates accurate customer insights, how do you speak to your entire customer success organization about the critical role of data? How do you coach them about critical role of customer and internal data and how it plays in the ability for customer success to achieve its mission of driving successful customer outcomes?
Yeah, and I think this is actually a great follow-on to even Sarah's last comment, because here's the thing. Our human interactions with our customers are less and less, which means it is vitally important that during every single interaction, we are providing value, tangible value, right? If we're going to get them on the phone, if we're going to get them in a QBR, if we're going to engage in a weekly, monthly, quarterly meeting, whatever it may be, is that it is our opportunity to bring the value that things like data analytics and predictive analytics can't bring, right? This is really where I hate using this phrase, but thought leadership becomes really important. This is how the CS resource starts changing their engagement and relationship with the customer. With this data, and it's funny because having been in CS for so long, as we started to look at digital journeys and programmatic journeys, every one of my sales or CS organizations have gotten a bit nervous. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're now doing this, through programs and digital, mm-hmm. what does that mean for the CSM role? And, mm-hmm. For me, it actually allows us to become much more powerful and potent with our engagement with our customers by having the data and the analytics, which is needed for these scale motions, whether they're digital or even in the human engagement. We actually are starting to turn from being reactive to proactive. Mm-hmm. Right. And we can do that by engaging, again, in whether it's a program, digital, or with humans. We can do that because now we're starting to have conversations about outcomes that we need to generate with our customers based on where they are, because we have the knowledge and the access to the data, versus those conversations 15 years ago as we were embarking on CS. We're like, so what are you doing? How are you using the technology? Where especially like a lot of the early solutions were on-demand solutions, which were really kind of a hosted product in the cloud, and we didn't have the access and insights that we do now. So from my perspective, this becomes a journey about higher value engagement with our customers and coaching and growing our CS resources to start having those more kind of thoughtful, strategic conversations instead of being, more tactical in the conversation, which allows them to be more impactful with the customer, and which allows us then to gain access to the customer when we need it, because there's confidence that that engagement will bring value and is not let's review your support tickets, right? Which is what, CSMs were doing 15 years ago, more so than anything.
Yeah, and just for the audience, when Kelly says 15 years ago, that's what she's talking about is the time that we interacted. And she was the head. So just for context, BMC Software is where we worked. And that was, they call it a legacy company, right? We don't, that's a kind of a bad phrase now because all companies kind of morph, and it has as well. But at the time, Kelly headed up customer success for the part of the business that was pure SaaS. It was its BMC's only first entry into the pure SaaS world. And so she was kind of pioneering within a legacy company how to do this stuff. And so when I hear her talk about this, I understand the context of opposition, having to choose the right words and the language to convince people and persuade people. Anyway, sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you.
No, I was just super excited about what Kelly said, because I do think that, to answer your question, Peter, like, you can't just talk to your CS org about the data, right? You have to talk about it with your partners. You have to talk it with product, with UX, with marketing. Like, we have the data, and everybody says they want to be data driven, but the power that you can have when actually looking at this and the telemetry, the metadata, going back to what Kelly said very early in the conversation, is that CSM can create that 360 and that narrative to say, no, this is what's happening from sales to activation, from activation to go live, from go live to 3 months, right? We can break it down and look at the cohort behavior, which tells a very significant story. And then, oh, by the way, we can then just go ahead and tweak little things within the experience. And then you have your seat at the table, right? So that's how you can really overcome this anxiety of, oh, we're going to this digital only model. What does that really mean for me as a relationship CSM? Well, you're still owning the relationship. You're owning the journey. But now you're a subject matter expert, and you have partners across the business that really value the insights and the extractions that you can provide, right? So I was just giddy with what Kelly was saying, because I'm like, yep. Like, you're able to, once you get a lot of this digital motion in place, you're leading and guiding the customer down not a choose your own adventure. I used to think of it as a choose your own adventure kind of experience for the customers. Like, we might lay out those breadcrumbs for them, but ultimately we're leading them down this path that's going to get them to, more adoption, increased usage, education, right? And it's micro snippets. Like, those breadcrumbs are those micro snippets of education that we're providing them along the way. And the CS team is still the ones guiding that. Well, maybe this isn't performing as well as we thought it was with this specific segment of customers or this cohort of customers. Let's work together. How can we tweak this? How can we improve the experience? So we're really lucky at US Bank. We have a great business intelligence team. And Kelly, you mentioned like the importance of data. I mean, we work in lockstep with them, right? So that was another kind of change management motion for us from a traditional CSM or traditional CS org, where we have to make them data obsessed, but we have to connect them with people that maybe can complement their skills. So we have a great partnership with our business intelligence team. They're constantly frequenting our team calls. They're, best friends forever in data at the US Bank level. But that helps us tweak our visualizations, also create sources of truth. I think that's also important, right? We talk about the different silos and getting buy-in from the different leaders. You also have to have buy-in in your dashboards and your visualizations to make sure you're all looking at the right data at the right time and not slicing and dicing it the way each organization needs to. So it starts with a lot of those foundational conversations and items.
So there's a couple of questions from the audience I think that I want to bring in at this time. And I'll start with Adam. I'll put yours second, but Andy Whitwell asked for Kelly, especially for Kelly, but Sarah, if you have thoughts on this, welcome to hear, or welcome for you to share those. So what are you experiencing with customers about their willingness to share data and telemetry? on technology adoption? Is it becoming the norm, or do customers treat this kind of data as confidential? And is there a trend you're seeing? And is there a role for CS to drive the customer to make the data available? I think that's a really important question.
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's a really complex question, right? Because depending upon the segmentation or the vertical will impact the willingness or even the ability for a customer to share telemetry and data. If you're in a public sector or federal space, it's really difficult to get those insights for compliance reasons, right? And so I think we are seeing, even for Cisco, where we have a large recurring revenue business today, which is an evolution from where Cisco began 40 years ago, and even at my past employers, where we had both true as a service cloud native offerings that developed kind of natively in the cloud, as well as where we went through a transformation of taking what was maybe a perpetual licensing model and moving it to the cloud for subscription and accessibility. I think we've seen a tremendous evolution of customers allowing access to things like telemetry and metadata. Is it 100% across the board? No. And that's, because of the unknowns, right? Obviously, privacy concerns, but it's becoming more of the norm as we see more applications, mainstream applications being used in large enterprise that are cloud native. You don't have an option, right? For the most part, that metadata is available. And I think companies are becoming really intelligent about how to gather that data and not crossing any privacy barriers. Now, I think there's a huge role for CS to play in this. And, my perspective on CS in general is that we have two roles. One is to curate the experience for the customer to drive them to value realization. Renewals, in my opinion, is never an outcome of CS. Value realization is the outcome of the CS engagement, and innately, renewals will follow when the customer is deriving value. Expansion will follow, right? And so I've always set my CS teams to be very clear. You're not chasing a renewal, you're chasing value realization for the customer. But the second very important component that I think the CS has is educating the customer. And, that's where the CS working with their customers in regards to telemetry, metadata, usage data is so vitally important, because we can curate such a better experience for our customers when we have access to the insights. And, ultimately, I've never met a CS organization that does not want to use, their powers for good, right? There's from a privacy perspective. And again, there's really good guardrails these days around what that usage, and metadata looks like. And so I think it's a big part of the CS relationship is to explain and educate the customer when we have access to this data. Here's the type of predictive analytics that we can be looking for, whether it's preventative around outages, because we're able to see what versions of software you're on, whether it is, analyzing a health check of your configuration settings for your security software, so we can identify where you have potential loopholes or you have a weakness in your current configurations, right? That could eventually impact the stability of your organization. And so I think there is a large education component that CS plays over multiple topics with our customers, but specifically around this, if there's a customer hesitant about it, because we are only as powerful as the data and insights we have access to. That's the stage that we're at today. And Mr. Customer, when you give me that access, here is the value. Here is where I become your trusted advisor to know that I am always, a mile ahead of you looking at potential issues, as well as doing the strategic analysis to say where you could be leveraging additional pieces of the software, whatever it is that you're procuring, to say you could get more value for your existing spend, or by the way, adding this on could, increase your value. So yes, I'm seeing the trend, more and more customers willing. We're just like, everybody's got, one of these. We're sharing data all day, every day, probably to extents we don't even want to know about. So I do think it's becoming, more common practice, but CS has a huge role, not only with educating the customer, but with them taking that data and again, using it for good to drive that strategic value and insights.
I feel like that was a money shot. Anyways, that's Sarah.
I think what Kelly just illustrated too is that even though we're talking about scaled models, there's still this opportunity for CSMs to engage with customers in a scaled or digital model. And this is a perfect example of one of those types of conversations, right? So if I'm a CSM and I have a cohort of customers, this almost becomes a way in which I segment my book of business to say, what group of customers do I have all of this information for? What are the group of customers that are lacking, right? It gives you an opportunity to engage with those customers and have a one-to-one conversation. We're not trying to remove the human aspect of this. And I think that's part of what, when people think digital first or scale, they're like, oh, you're removing the human aspect. No, we're not at all. In fact, there's still a lot of opportunity for CSMs, and that's a perfect example of a conversation that a CSM can have to drive more value, not only for themselves but for the customers, right? For the business. So,
yeah,
I love that example.
Yeah, I think that's, both of you are saying what I've long felt is the secret and the power of digital customer success. Let's call it that. Is that ultimately it's going to benefit the customer in a great way if it's done properly, and the CSMs can truly live the proactive model that we've always said it should be. Digital offers that opportunity to do that because of really organizing the data and leveraging the data in really intelligent ways to persuade and educate and drive adoption and all that kind of stuff. So Adam, I think I'm going to say legal, asked the question, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're taking the customer's perspective here. Where in the journey would the buy-in take place of the customer? Is this a sales responsibility, customer success? It's a good question. Where in the journey do you get that buy-in from the customer, or do you get the buy-in? And how do you measure if you're ensuring successful scaling? So who wants to take that?
D, all of the above.
Okay. So you do get buy-in.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? The buy-in has to start at the very first levels of engagement with the customer, right? And so, when you start thinking about adoption and value realization, this is not a CS problem. This is a company problem, right? This is sales, this is marketing, this is product. Like, we all have a role to play in that. And so, everybody has to have some ownership in that and continue to reiterate. When I saw that question, Peter, I actually took it from buy-in within setting up scale within an organization.
Okay.
And for me, that's the non-starter. But again, D, all of the above, and before you start, like the commitment, the investment, the dollars, and the participation, right? Because here's the thing, we talk about things like telemetry and metadata. I can only get that if my product team is building the product to collect that. So, and then most importantly, it's kind of like, this is how I feel about like NPS or CSAT. Do not ask for feedback if you're not going to action it. I think of the same thing from like a metadata perspective. Do not plan to collect usage data if you are not then going to use it back in the product to make better product decisions, right? So, all of those stakeholders across, if the question is more in regards to, buy-in across orgs to drive digital, it's got to be at the beginning. And if you don't have everyone's alignment, then you really have to go back to your business case to say, is this going to be impactful? Am I going to get an ROI?
Yeah. When I read the question, I also took it from internal as a leader, but I like the challenge of thinking through it from a customer perspective, right? My experience might be a little different from others, where we didn't have a customer success function really at all. And so when we built out a scaled model and went to pursue this, it was less about gaining buy-in and more about setting expectations with the customer. So we went through and actually we let the customer know at what point in the journey they're at and what to expect in the coming weeks or days from their experience. So we're actually letting them know you're now at this part and look for these communications from us here, right? Now we're getting more sophisticated and we're continuing to evolve that, but it's less about buy-in from a digital perspective and more about expectation setting and nurturing so that they can look out for these resources that will help them self-serve so that they don't have to contact customer care, right? So that's kind of how we've seen success in our programs from a customer facing perspective. And again, we can't say it enough is that you have to have buy-in from all of the other areas. You have to start, from that square one foundation of what are we all trying to achieve and how can we support each other in going there, what's in place today to move forward. So Kelly articulated that better than I just did, but all of the above.
You weren't bad at all. No, I appreciate that. So my next question, actually, I think the way you both addressed Adam's question goes towards answering the next one. But I think the next one I want to ask anyways, because there's a little bit of a wrinkle I'd like to present. And that is that you both work in massive corporations and you both worked for massive corporations. And I'm not suggesting that complexity does not exist outside of massive corporations. Of course it does. But large corporations present very particular needs and requirements of leaders. And customer success is in a unique position trying to influence the company to think a little differently about the customer. So knowing all that, do you each have like a particular method or strategy for persuading and educating leaders of other organizations around securing their commitment to help customer success in more of a programmatic way and not in an ad hoc way? And so, Kelly, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, so it comes down to, it's pretty fundamental. And I have always had a pretty succinct way of doing it, but you have to be able to answer the what's in it for me. So as I was speaking earlier around, getting buy-in, say, from product, right? To be we need their participation in any type of customer success engagement, digital scale, high touch, it does not matter, right? We need products engagement. And, I think of CS as really being hub and spoke, where CS being, the hub, and then the different parts of the organization. Now, I may be biased because I've been a practitioner for so long, so I just think we're the center of the universe, but it does really work, right? Whether it's the support organization, product, sales, engineering, marketing, right? When we're asking all of these organizations to come together, we have to be able to answer the what's in it for them, right? So from a product perspective, getting this up and running, we have the ability and the insights for them to be able to drive a more pragmatic, very specific product roadmap, right? We understand what the customer is using, where to invest our time, where do you invest the money from a product perspective. On the support side, but by the data that's gathered and understanding the customer's journey, you can start looking at kind of root cause analysis and what can we address, what can we surface up to the customer where they are to answer their questions, to reduce call volumes, to reduce MTTR. And so when I'm fortunate, when I came to Cisco, there was already, they were pretty far on their journey. But when I've done this in organizations that had kind of where I was starting the customer success motion, it was really a business case for each of the stakeholders to say, okay, I need this from you, and here's how it's going to benefit our customer, but here's also what's in it for you. Here's the value that you're going to get, whether it's cost reductions, efficiencies, whether it's, insights to be able to drive the business decision. And not for nothing, but I have that is my universal question, even with our customers. Like, do not call our customer unless you can articulate to them what's in it for me from their perspective. And so I think that's, just a super important approach that allows us to be highly empathetic to the folks that we're working with, and making sure that it also fact checks us, right? Do I want product to focus time on this? Because if I can't give them a good what's in it for them, like, should I really be asking them for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I followed a simple frame, like, just because you're right, we work in complex environments, but our approach doesn't have to be complex. It can be super simple, just, going on a listening tour, and that sounds so like cliche, but that's exactly where I started. It was, help me understand, what are your goals? Like, what are you driving towards? What are your top things? Here's my vision, right? This is what I'd like to build. Can you help me poke holes in it? Help me validate it, right? And oftentimes in those conversations, that's where you come to there's a lot, again, going back to the overlap, there's a lot of shared overlap. We're all working towards the same things. We want customers to um, use the product consistently and adopt more features that we develop. Great, cool. I want the same thing. So how do we do that together? Oh, you don't have the right visualization tools. Guess what? I'm investing in some in-app tools on my journey. Perhaps there's an opportunity for you to leverage this as well, get to that product telemetry, get more insight into customer behavior, right? So I think there was a lot of, for me, in my experience, it started with that listening tour and just building that relationship and those rapport, because you then understand who in those spokes is going to be your champion and come along on this journey with you, right? You're making them look good. They're helping you get what you need. And ultimately, it's for the betterment of the customer and the customer experience. Um, Along our journey, we have been able and been fortunate to invest in tools, right, that have benefited the other areas of the business. So I did leverage that at different points in my journey, because it was a shiny toy that everybody wanted. And I was like, well, let's do this together. Let's build this foundation together. And now we can actually analyze customer behavior together and know that we need to develop a different button, or customers aren't doing things, right? So then it creates this nice circular conversation and this ongoing innovation wheel between you're starting to get that engine moving with CS at the center. And I share that same sentiment, by the way. We're connecting the dots, we're moving this engine, and you're doing it in a way where everybody has stake in the game. If they don't have stake, if they don't, it's never going to get off the ground, and I say that lovingly, but it's true. Nobody will continue to support you. So I would say start with a solid foundation, have like what your ideal vision is, go on your listening tour, connect with people, find those shared metrics that you can work on together, have shared ownership, and then iterate with one another. Maybe create rules of engagement. We had to do that with our marketing team. We had to create rules of engagement around what we were going to communicate, what they were going to own, and then measure, right? Come back and create rituals together where you're measuring these things and you're, again, telling a unified story across the different journey, but each team has ownership and accountability.
Yeah, I love that. I love the listening tour idea. And an easy way to think of it is to think of customer success as serving its customers, which are internal customers, much as you should be asking your customers, going on a listening tour with them, a virtual listening tour, to gain information. And essentially what you're doing is putting meat behind the word partnership. In both directions. And just for both of you, Sarah, you might smile at this, but in Oracle about 7 or 8 years ago, I was a strategist in customer success, and I came up with this slide that showed customer success at the middle of the spoken wheel. I got fierce opposition, fierce. Kept delivering it though, but yeah, there was like real friction just presenting that slide, because that was foreign concept. Customer success with service. You guys are kind of the end of the tail, not in the middle. So anyways, it was fun.
Get into debates around who owns the customer. And you're like, well, We all do, but we're the ones connecting you to the customer, right?
Yeah, but that goes to the
Data.
benefits. Here's the benefits that we could derive if we think about things differently. So, Sarah, you mentioned technology. My next question is really, are there technology pillars, and you can start here, that need to be in place for a fully functioning digital customer success?
I think it depends on the organization and what you have access to. But I broke it down into 3 areas to help me understand where we had white space in gaps in our understanding, and a lot of it helped us bridge our visualizations for business intelligence and data and dashboards down the road. Now it's still a little fragmented, but very simple. Program planning, right? What are all the things that go into program planning? And that could be, we talk about CRM data, we bring that in, Service Cloud, sales data, product telemetry, behavior inputs. We use BigQuery and Pendo for a lot of that. And then our LMS, right? We talk about self-serving more, customers actually using it, right? So that all goes into our program planning bucket. Our next pillar would be program setup. And then we have program analysis. Program setup, we have a very simple format, but we use Salesforce Marketing Cloud for journey orchestration in conjunction with Pendo. In-app and in-app experiences are very important to us. And then we also leverage for things that we can't accomplish with Marketing Cloud and stuff. We do use our own digital properties. And then from a program analysis perspective, we are working to get everything into BigQuery so we can leverage Power BI dashboards that is accessible across the entire organization. Right now, it's a bit fragmented. Everything's kind of living in its own little silo, but we're working on it. So again, it's as long as the pieces of the journey are connected and you've got a good way to visualize all of that, which unfortunately for us still comes down to a good old Excel spreadsheet and a calendar. It doesn't have to be overly complex in how you execute.
Okay, that's good. Kelly?
Yeah, same. Sarah, I think, articulated it impeccably well, probably better than I could have.
Okay.
And I do think, there is also, I think sometimes like this big bang theory, like you got to do this big bang approach. And sometimes, the Excel spreadsheets and the calendar, and Outlook calendar is what you have and is okay for your foundation to begin. But all of the components, I would reiterate all the components that Sarah stated. The only other thing that I would add, which when you go for a job interview and they say, what's the one mistake you made? So for me, it always comes back to setting up scale without thinking about the content that was going to be delivered on your digital. So, I think that's just another pillar, as, Sarah mentioned, your journey orchestrator, whether it's Salesforce Marketing Cloud, your customer 360, your analytics, right, to be able to identify the impact. But for me, I think, especially with any type of digital or scale journey, the content is so incredibly important, and the curation process for that content, the refreshing of that, right? Because it can get stale quickly. And really the rituals that you have around ensuring that whatever you're engaging with your customer in that scale or programmatic motion, that it's supported and you have the right content to support that journey where the customer can go into, which starts to alleviate some of the human dependencies. Again, I don't believe humans will ever come out of customer success. And there may be a lead first from a digital or programmatic perspective, but the people are going to be needed, right? Even with things like generative AI, the humans are still going to be needed.
Oh.
But that content component, I think, is really important to support the backbone. And that scale journey for me, again, whether it's digital or should actually go across all of your touch models, right? Whether it's pure digital or it's high touch, there should still be a programmatic digital supporting motion for your customers, leveraging that carefully, curated content.
Yeah, and I think that would address the concerns that CFOs have around spend. I think ultimately the digital infrastructure will basically optimize the spend for customer success and produce better results.
Yep.
So I have another question, but I think I'm going to hold that because we have 3 questions I'd like to kind of look at from the audience. Patrick, I'm going to save yours for a bit, but Adam asked a good question around community. What's your experience implementing community as part of this whole scale model? He says it feels like customers have so many communities now, the market's starting to get saturated. Very good point. Kelly, you start.
So I think community is important, but it comes back to the premise that every point of engagement has to be really valuable for the customer, because there are so many communities that are out there for literally everything, that we have to make sure it's value based. I think the other thing with communities, the value of a community to a customer is other customers. It's not me at Cisco. It's my other customers that are walking in their footsteps, right? And so figuring out how to incentivize, I always recommend gamification in communities, right? Incentivize and gamification in a community to get the participation of your customers. In our communities, we have community owners that are moderators that help drive the conversation, but our customers are not coming to the communities for Cisco insights necessarily. They'll take them, don't get me wrong. But the power of any community is how active you can get the community to be with each other. And so again, there are communities that even in my personal life, I am part of, that frankly don't generate a lot of value for me. And so I don't frequent them. There are ones local here in the Tampa area that I frequent daily or, weekly, because there's good, valuable insights. So I think communities are vitally important. I think they're highly impactful. I think you have to moderate them closely to make sure they don't become, a complaint center. Although if there are complaints, you have to acknowledge and address, and you need to take the feedback and action it, which is also highly important to get an active community, but also, getting the customers to participate in it. And again, things like gamification really help with that. But I think they're probably more important now than ever before, especially since we are in this digital age where we do naturally want to self-serve before we pick up the phone and call someone. And I want to self-serve with somebody who is maybe an iPhone user when my iPhone has a problem than necessarily Apple, because they're going to give me, some very technical So I think they're highly important, highly valuable, but we have to be, again, really thoughtful about what we're putting out there, how we're inundating our customers with information. And then when there are issues, complaints that we acknowledge, we take the feedback, we action it, and be, respectful in those areas.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way to frame that. Sara, what are your thoughts on this?
We're evaluating community at this point. We're a highly regulated industry, within US Bank. And so for us, it definitely comes down to value, but I also look at my customer behavior, right? Like I'm working with small business owners who are very short on time, right? And so the value, when you speak about value, it's value. Are they going to find value in that, right? Are they going to go to a community and self-serve? We have to figure out a way to do that. So we're still evaluating it. And then of course the risk and compliance piece for us is the biggest thing, because you're right? Our customers are extremely fickle. When something goes wrong in the application, it can easily become a complaint center. And how do we manage that from a reputation management perspective? So that's about all I can add. I think it depends.
Yeah, my experience over the last 20 years with communities is, as Kelly says, the secret is really moderation, in terms of like the vendor needs to be on the platform, helping to connect, helping to nurture the community, helping to provide answers, even getting involved and say, hey, I know this customer, and say that out loud, and maybe this person knows. And it's an investment. And if it don't invest in it, it's probably going to wither, and then it'll be a wasted kind of investment. So April Miller asked a question. So Sara, like you mentioned about the listening tour, and she wants to know if it includes understanding the sales compensation model and how it relates to CS on the listening tour.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, especially if there's any kind of upsell opportunities or program expansion opportunities within your journey. We have a free model, and while the commercial portion of it does not live with our team, we have to support and build out a framework for how those customers migrate, right? To Kelly's earliest point in this conversation, where she was saying around, we're creating value, and therefore we're providing influence towards program expansion and renewal. 100%. How do we get that customer back to the right team for that upsell, that warm opportunity? So we're still sourcing, CS source leads, if you do any of that, or opportunities. It's just figuring out the right way. So you need to understand how they're compensated. Is it only on the initial sale, or is it on expansion? And figuring that out early will help influence your program structure as you move through this scaled motion.
Yeah. Kelly, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, Sarah's spot on. I think just that maybe additional is, understanding also gives the ability to help influence as well, right? And I think we're starting to see more and more sales comp structures include things like retention, expansion, adoption, right? Instead of just, which, is it's a tight line to walk, but that helps with landing. That adoption is everyone's problem, right? Whether it's expansion targets on existing basis from a sales component, you can't expand if they haven't adopted and they're not, deriving value. So I think that's the other component, is then how do you have the ability to start influencing sales compensation structures to make sure that, again, everybody in the boat is rowing in the same direction, which is, curating value for the customer.
So for our final question, I ask everybody, all the guests, if they have a book they'd like to recommend to the audience. It doesn't have to strictly be about this subject, but hopefully it's kind of related in some way, whether it's soft or hard. So let's start with you, because I'm going to ask Kelly to do 2 books because of one of the questions from the audience.
Sure. So my team knows this. I think I have some people from my team on this call actually right now, but I leveraged this book called Smart Brevity. It's written by the co-founders of Axios. And so when we think about customer success at scale, it's serving up micro snippets of information throughout the journey. And we're not using long form emails and newsletters anymore. Like that is gone, right? And so we have to get to the point really, really fast. We have to get our customers to value very quickly. And so this book helps you really rethink and reframe your approach from how you present, how you host meetings, how you write emails. And so it's a great resource for you as a leader, as a team member, but also for implementing and restructuring your programs in a scaled model.
That's terrific. Kelly, so as I mentioned, there's 2 questions of books. So like Sarah, please recommend a book. But from Patrick, he asked if you have recommended about a book for buy-in of CS to teach the value realization. So I don't know which one.
This is an oldie but goodie. This is the customer success book that was Nick Mehta and Dan Steinman and Lincoln Murphy. This has been out for, I don't even know, for some time now. A lot has evolved in customer success since this book was written and released, but I still think it has a really good foundation. There's another one that I have, and it's called Even If You're Not Chief Customer Officer 2.0, which from a positioning perspective has so many insights that I think is really valuable. I also think I will always say, like any conversation, we should have people should be reading crucial conversations as well, because once you have the knowledge, it's then landing it. So specifically in regards to that buy-in question, I would go there. Me personally, in regards to my book, I have, there was a leadership development program that I was part of 20 years ago at CA. And as part of that, a required read was called Leadership and Self-Deception. And I actually don't have a copy right here because I just mailed my copy to an employee. But it's by the Arbinger Institute. And I have read this book no less than 15 times over the last 20 years. I have distributed to thousands of employees. Leadership and self-deception, and you don't have to be a leader to read this book, but it is about your perspective and what they call being in the box, and how kind of being in that box, one, creates your perception of other people, but also can create the perception of you. And for you to be your best true self in personal or professional life, how you get out of the box. And it has been the most impactful read in my life. And I actually read a lot, which is why I go back usually once a year and kind of skim through it. I find as I get older and my career longer and tenure, it actually applies, you know, first when I was married 10 years ago to, you know, to my husband. Now that I have children, how do I, you know, how am I in the box with my children? But it's really beneficial. I will tell you, I think it was written in the 80s. And so the scenarios are very 80s-ish. So if you can kind of get past that, you know, it has, I can honestly say it has fundamentally changed my life many times.
So people are still reading Marcus Aurelius from 2,000 years ago, so that's okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. We've run out of time. This is a fantastic conversation. And audience, thank you for those questions. Are wonderful and really enjoy the engagement. Kelly and Sarah, really appreciate your time and energy. I knew this would be a great conversation, and then you guys delivered it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So
Thank
pay
you.
attention, audience. We'll be doing another webinar. Hopefully, I'm just trying to schedule it the week before Christmas. So it's going to be tight, but heads up on that, okay? Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.